There's been some very interesting threats emanating from HM government in response to the public order mayhem across the country caused by two-tier policing, according to patriots. That is what they claim, that is what they feel. They don't have an opinion, though, according to the government, obviously. None of us have an opinion, unless we're following the single narrative, i.e., the narrative of the establishment. No one else is entitled to an opinion. An opinion is one thing, however, taking part in riots, and looting in particular, is another thing entirely, isn't it? Well, I don't condone rioting or looting in actual fact, but namely, I would say the threat that interests me most of all was when Sir Keir Starmer, as he's now been nicknamed, said they were going to use criminal behaviour orders against those involved in the protests and riots. Well, anybody arrested in one of these protests could be classed as rioting without actually having been involved in any form of rioting or looting for that matter. This is the whole issue of two-tier policing, and yes, it most definitely does exist across the entire country. We've seen the evidence of that these last few days, where certain sections of society are just left alone to do whatever they want, carrying weapons, Muslim Defence League being the primary example, whereas white patriots are targeted with the full force of the law, courtesy of Comrade Stalin and his new Politburo. That said, let's put the amateur dramatics aside, shall we, and concentrate on the Criminal Behaviour Order, which is a subject close to my heart. Well, it's not in actual fact, but that's just a phrase, isn't it? The CBO, how does it work? Why was it contrived? How was it used? Well, Starmer is threatening patriots involved in these protests and riots with the use of CBOs. So the Criminal Behaviour Order replaced the notorious ASBO. Perhaps in some ways, a desire to crack down on antisocial behaviour, vandalism, sheer wanton criminality, wrecking neighbourhoods is a good idea in actual fact. I think we all want to see that. However, the CBO, when it was first enacted, was used to silence people exposing certain things that the establishment didn't want people to know. It's classed as antisocial behaviour. This, of course, was the cornerstone of Nazi Germany and also the Soviet Union. They declared anyone who wasn't towing the line, in other words, adopting the single narrative, of being antisocial terrorists. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? So Britain, of course, or UKSSR, as some people call it, is now falling into the same swamp of oppression, of totalitarianism, which is how the CBO is used. I see, my experience of dealing with the CBO is this. It is designed to take over every single aspect of your life. And I'm making this video quite simply to warn people who are being threatened with the CBO of what to expect. So it can literally mean anything. Let's say Fred Bloggs is convicted of riot and affray, public order offences. He either pleads guilty to it or is found guilty by a jury based on so-called evidence. So then the Crown Prosecution Service, in league with the police, decide that they're going to apply for a criminal behaviour order. Well, the first thing to do is to ensure that your solicitor goes through the application for a CBO with a fine-tooth comb. Quite frankly, the fairy tales that they make up to acquire a CBO, well, I would like to say astonishing, but frankly, given my experience, nothing astonishes me anymore when dealing with the regime. However, that said, any falsehood, any inaccuracy that is found in the application for a CBO should be used as grounds to challenge it. However, that said, let me assure you of this. A judge, district judge, even a magistrate will be very sympathetic to an application for a CBO. on anybody involved in protests and riots, right-wing, white patriots in particular. Be in no doubt about it whatsoever. You're not dealing with a fair, balanced legal system. There are no real checks and balances. This is a politicised legal system on steroids. Starmer, of course, met with senior judges today, and during which they decided on exactly the nature of the sentences they're going to hand out. It seems to be a foregone conclusion that everyone arrested is going to be convicted. Or maybe they'll just allow one or two acquittals to make it look good, to create the contrivance of the wheels of justice turning round in a fair and balanced manner. I don't buy into any of that nonsense whatsoever. I've seen it at the business end many times over the last few years. So, in essence, they can make the CBO, if it's granted, do anything they want it to do. For example, they could apply to the judge that you should not be allowed to see your family again, or that you should not be allowed to see your family without supervision. Of course, there's no need whatsoever for these measures, but it's the power tripping and the malice that drives it. They could also exclude you from your own town, exclude you from a certain street, exclude you from a shopping centre, exclude you from a hotel, exclude you from an entire city, exclude you from an entire county. But you can be certain of this, they won't exclude you from the entire country, because it's only within the parameters of the United Kingdom that they can control you with a Criminal Behaviour Order. And this does not apply just to people involved in the protests and rioting and looting, obviously. It also applies to people online who've been spreading disinformation. There's absolutely no doubt that some people have got the wrong end of the stick and probably do have malicious reasons for it. However, that said, the vast majority of people simply have made a mistake. They bought into a story bought by this person or that person without actually making any attempt to verify it. You know, there's no reason why they should be subjected to a criminal behaviour order, a devastating instrument of tyranny in actual fact, just because someone's made a mistake. That means nothing to the police and the CBO, of course. We are definitely dealing with a two-tier policing system. And by definition, if there is a two-tier policing system, which there is, then there is also a two-tier judiciary, a two-tier legal system, a two-tier sense of justice and fairness and equity before the law. Forget all of those fine words. That's just nonsense. They have no place in reality. They belong in the textbooks. The reality of the legal system, however, is something completely different. Mark my words. Do not take these threats from Sir Keir Starmer lightly. The CBO is truly a devastating, strangulating piece of legislation which will take over your entire life. And in the first instance, when it's first ordered and it becomes effective when you're released from prison, it is extremely difficult to live within it. It's a very scary piece of legislation. And of course, you will make mistakes, and any mistake, bang, straight back into jail. Oh, sorry, it's not quite as simple as that. Straight back before the courts, and if you decide to plead not guilty, you wish to challenge the allegations against you, then of course you have to stand trial before a jury. It's pretty much a straightforward matter, i.e., did this person breach this aspect of the order? And obviously, if they have the evidence to prove that you did, then it's a maximum of 5 years in prison. Not much fun, is it? And most likely, the application for a CBO will be for an indefinite period. So if you're in your early 20s, mid-20s, etc., and you live until you're 60, 70, 80, the CBO, if it is not revoked or amended at any stage on application to the courts, will be for all of those decades of your life, you will live under the cosh of this tyranny. The CBO basically is a potent piece of legislation, and that's the way it was designed. It was designed originally to deal with antisocial behaviour. vandalism in communities, not to be used as gagging orders to slap on people who've said this, that and the other on social media. But that's the way it's become now. And of course, they believe it's been a great success. They claim it's a weapon in their armoury. Of course it is. This is the reason why Sir Keir Starmer, and I didn't really see any need or reason to give him the respect of calling him Sir Keir Starmer. I think Sir Keir Starmer is quite apt. It certainly is from his time in the New Labour regime as the Attorney General and all the other acts of criminality that he covered up. Ignored, including the grooming gang scandal, Jimmy Savile et al. Anyway, let's get back to the issue of the CBO. So, you're released from prison. I know this is all future tense, basically. We're fast forwarding, but this is something that you need to be aware of. This is why I've made this video, to advise you accordingly. The simple truth is, on release from prison, you'll have no idea what the CBO is all about. And then you'll read through it, etc. You'll try and live within it. You may well even be assigned a offending officer or offender officer, basically. Somebody who manages the CBO. In most cases, you simply won't, even though it stipulates that. They can also put in the CBO that you are to reside at a certain address and to be there whenever they dictate that you should be there. In effect, de facto house arrest. That's the reality of the CBO. You know, it is quite simply legal overreaction on a massive but contrived malicious scale. In many cases, a CBO simply is not necessary whatsoever. However, in the real world where we live today, and particularly in this case of two-tier policing, this is what we're dealing with. This is what Sir Keir Starmer is threatening people with. And he's doing it for a very good reason, because he knows perfectly well how devastating the CBO can be once it's applied to someone who's been convicted and deemed suitable to be subjected to a CBO. My advice to you basically is this: to challenge the CBO once you have built up a solid enough case to challenge it. It can be amended. Usually it will be amended. Some judges basically act too severely. But, you know, if it's made in a magistrate's court, you'll pretty much have to go back to a Crown Court to appeal it. If it's made in a Crown Court, you'll have to go back to the same Crown Court to appeal it or amend it. There's an outside chance it could be revoked, but when it's so political as this, there's absolutely no way anyone involved in this, this so-called civil war, for want of a better description, because it's all political and it's all completely biased against white patriotic people, there's no way any application to revoke a CBO is going to succeed. That said, however, they might just make it look good and amend one or two aspects of it. But, you know, the CBO is an extremely serious piece of legislation. And this is why I'm warning you about it. And they don't have to just use one. They can use 2, 3. They hand them out like confetti, in actual fact. Let's say Fred and Joanne blogs. Yeah, in the interests of sexual equality. Fred and Joanne blogs are both subjected to 2 criminal behaviour orders. So what happens is this: if they breach them, it's not just one CBO that they'll be prosecuted under. It will be both, which means double the jail time, double the terror tactics. Instead of 5 years maximum, 10 years maximum. This is the reality of living with the CBO. Most solicitors, in my experience, utterly useless, work cap in glove with the Crown Prosecution Service, because they don't just defend people, they also work for the Crown Prosecution Service, prosecuting people. There's a very fine dividing line between defence and prosecution. And the CBO is such a serious piece of legislation that I urge everyone to take it seriously. I mean, I'm not in favour of rioting and looting, full stop. However, I'm completely in favour of campaigning, and I'm completely in favour, obviously, of free speech. Freedom of expression in particular is the closest thing to my heart. That said, please do not underestimate the Criminal Behaviour Order. When you've challenged it and it's been amended, or your application to revoke or amend it has been refused, you're pretty much then in a very difficult situation of not being able to challenge it again. And a rare outside chance that you may well be able to get it into one of the superior courts, but highly unlikely, and they're not suddenly going to have a fit of compassion for anyone involved in rioting and looting, particularly in the context of two-tier policing. No, absolutely not. They wish to maintain the status quo at any cost. And the cost to you, my friends, is the Criminal Behaviour Order. And I would say this: if anyone out there is subjected to a Criminal Behaviour Order or threatened with the CBO, by all means, please do contact me. I'm perfectly prepared to help people, reasonable people, that is. I'm not going to help abusive, selfish people who don't care about anything or anyone other than themselves. But I will help people if they find themselves in this terrifying situation of being subjected to a Criminal Behaviour Order. And all that I can advise is this: if you are subjected to a CBO, comply with it until you are in a position to challenge it, to revoke it or amend it. It can be fairly lenient, although the CBO is a very, very, very strong piece of legislation. It can also be extremely terrifying, far more extreme than throwing bricks, bottles and stones at two-tier police officers. And that's my whole point. But that doesn't matter to them. All they're interested in is maintaining the status quo by any means necessary. And the CBO is one of the big weapons in their armoury, as they see it. Otherwise, Sir Keir Starmer and his Politburo wouldn't have come up with the idea, would they? We're 2 days short of Keir Starmer being Prime Minister for a month. And already we're seeing the legislative tyranny on steroids. Bear in mind, he's only threatening certain sections of the community. Not everyone, just white British patriots. So if you're involved in any form of arrest and prosecution and you want advice on the CBO, if you're at liberty to do that, because obviously he's threatening to remand anyone involved in these protests. So I'm willing to help, but my advice to you is this: please do take the Criminal Behaviour Order very, very seriously, because it is a life-changing piece of legislation by design. Take care and stay safe out there. And if you like this video, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Thanks, folks.